building technology to create an outcome was hard. It's not hard anymore. So the art's now gotten down to, do I understand what moves my business? It demands nothing less than a complete rethink of what you're doing and how you work. I don't think it destroys expertise, but I think it allows you to use that expertise better. So that's like a tipping point of sorts. So I do think there's gonna be some massive changes from that. There is this looming sort of have and have not situation coming.
So this is Joe Bradley, Chief Technology Officer, artist formerly known as the genius of AI of all things, circuitous route. But most importantly, Joe, I can't wait to hear about your opera background, because I have heard people describe artificial intelligence as the opera and symphony of technology. So it makes perfect sense that you do what you do. Yeah, how about that, right? For
I haven't. That's a new one for me. Well, thanks for having me on. That's a new one for me. I haven't heard about the opera or symphony of computing, but I like it. It is back there. As a younger man, as a high school student, I was, trying to find my way in the world. I always really liked math, but this was, the 90s at this point. It maybe wasn't as cool to like math back then as it is now. And so what could be cooler than classical music? Okay, maybe I didn't make an upgrade there, but nonetheless,
I think you did. Yeah,
I got into it when I watched my brother do it as a kid, and I was like, I can do that too. And had some talent for it and enjoyed it, and went to school for it for a while out in Ohio at this conservatory called Oberlin. And I still love it. I still love singing. I still love music. When I get a chance to do it, I do it. It's more rare. But after a bit, I left that. I went and studied English literature for a while, became a classroom teacher, eventually found my way back to math and physics and was a physicist. And then finally, after that, started in technology with Amazon, and kind of that's where the latter stage of my career has kind of began.
I love that. And let's kick it off right there, right? So there's a lot of leadership announcements happening across the C-suite, enterprise or beyond, or I guess mid-market, et cetera, where there's a chief AI officer that's announced. And sometimes folks ask the question of like, well, is that the chief technology officer? Is that a CIO? What's the difference? Is that a chief data officer or digital officer? I wonder, because I know your background, and I wonder if you could provide a little bit of perspective for the audience on, the chief technology officer and or the chief AI officer, the role that you're seeing out in the landscape, and why both exist, and or how some companies are evolving or merging those into one and the same because of how much is going on right now in the AI ecosystem.
I'll take a stab at it. I think, mileage may vary. Different companies have different histories. And I am a big believer that, having worked at Amazon and at Nike and other places where innovation was primary, but the culture was completely different, I am a big believer that you've got to kind of organize and work different companies different ways. But to me, what those monikers mean, your chief technology officer is your person who is driving your technology innovation, typically driving your innovation in your client-facing products, as opposed to your CIO, who, in my mind, again, mileage may vary, is the one driving your internal operations, your technology there, if you have those two split. And we have that split at IDC. I have a great partner in Dave McKenna, who, if you ever want to interview someone else from IDC, he's a great candidate. We'll have that split to keep things focused, to really preserve focus for the part of your company that's going to go face your customer versus keep your internals healthy. And then AIO, I think that's one where I've seen a lot more variation, and I think it's one of these roles that's probably likely to change rapidly as the technology changes so rapidly. Like what it means to be a chief AI officer today versus 5 years ago, I think is quite different. They existed 5 years ago. They were a little bit rare, and they probably were confined to companies where they really had a detailed AI problem that they were building a lot of models for. Now I think that there's a little bit of a diffusion of that title against a broader range of objectives within the company, making sure that the whole company is using AI well is a great use for a role like that. Making sure that the company is using AI well specifically for their clients could be too. So that one I see is in a lot of flux, and I think it's a healthy flux. I just think that the world's changing so fast that you'd be crazy not to change with it.
Without a doubt. And I just took a note on something you just said there. So using AI well, I think that's a really important topic. And I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions and perspectives about what that actually means, how to do it. And I know there's a lot of context to consider, but what do you see out there in the wild, Joe, where you see a company that is doing it well, and then those that are trying to get there, but they're not there just yet? What do you see?
Yeah, I think that it's not dissimilar to the problem statement around using technology well. In a way, we've gotten used to the problem statement on technology, and I think we're used to seeing companies, we identify them as good tech companies and innovative. That doesn't mean that every company that uses tech well uses AI well, of course, but I think you've got this tool, and I mean, this is kind of a banal answer for you, but I think it's the right answer. You've got this tool, and the art of using it well is the art of matching it to your business objectives, which is the art of understanding your business and what moves it, and where you can do some good in that framework, right? So it's not easy. One thing we all know is it's not hard, I should say, to go produce AI, technology that uses AI now to do something. That's a massive change. Building technology to create an outcome was hard. It's not hard anymore. So the art's now gotten down to, do I understand what moves my business? Do I understand what outcomes will actually provide value for me? And can I go after those in a clean way? And one of the first things I did at IDC, for instance, was to start working on using AI. This is back in early 2024 now. Or late 2024, I mean to say, using AI to build on and to help us build more easily, more gracefully, better, faster some of our core Marketscape products, which are, and the reason I focus there is that particular document, that particular research project has its kind of its own small business within IDC, right? It's a partitionable element of the IDC, commercial go-to-market. And so knowing that you can work against something where you can truly see the outcome and run the business end-to-end against it, to me, that's a great place to start. Of course, there's a lot more to do than just that. But in a nutshell, yeah, I'd say, if you've got the art of understanding your business, graphing technology to it down, you're gonna extend those same concepts to grafting AI into solving the problems.
I love that you call out something super tangible like the Marketscape, and I love your research, as you know. And I wonder for this audience, so my audience is generally, it's like super technical or super non-technical, but it tends to be the types of folks that are all intellectually curious, and they love to hear tangible examples. So I don't know how far you can go on that, just double clicking into it, but maybe could you walk us through a little bit of how you thought about it, what you started to see is the opportunity to graph AI into it, and how you've stepped into evolving it and changing, whether it be the go-to-market, whether it be the consumption of it,
Sure.
Whatever you're comfortable talking about. I think people would love to hear that 'cause it's tangible.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a bit of an evolution at IDC, so maybe I'll take you through the phases of that evolution. Because when I came to IDC, we were a company that was still, and we still are, I mean, every company is forever learning to build. So we had to kind of like work our way through, a process to get where we are today. The beginning project, that Marketscape project that I mentioned, was a good beginning project for us because it was very siphoned off. It was really a matter of, let's make more of these documents, let's make them better, let's make it easier for our customers to interact with us, to produce them. And that could all be done in a box, so to speak. We also did some work internally at coming out of that to help analysts write and author research generally better. That created some technology, to access and use our data in a chat system that then sort of formed the basis for the product offering that we just released a month or so ago. I was able to take that early work to our board of directors. I was able to show it to the executives of the company as well, and kind of prove to the company with all the people that had come alongside me on that journey that we were capable of doing something that had high value, right?
Yeah.
That we could process. Now remember, this is mid 2025, early 2025 now, so that we could process the IDC data. We could use it in a way that would provide meaningful business intelligence. That formed the foundation for the work that we started, which was originally going to be sort of aimed at improving the IDC web experience, making it easier to digest and synthesize our content, and eventually became what we launched in July, which was IDC Quanta, which is now probably best formulated as this intelligence layer for the new AI technology world. Idea being, the market intelligence should be wherever you are, and should help you with not just decision making, not just learning, but should help you in any moment where you're trying to build any work product that can benefit from it. So kind of a multi-step evolution from do the easy thing to prove that you can start to do the harder thing, to go on a real product development and engineering process to productionize all that, and then make it into the cornerstone of your offering as a company, right? That changed our product set at the end of the day.
I love that explanation. And I was talking to someone today about his CEO who, has seen AI, right? Has experienced it enough where he can't unsee it. And he's getting all excited, right? And he's like, oh, I got, 17 years of notes over here and some of them are handwritten. And I want all this stuff to be, his words, not mine, but, chattable. I want a chatbot, right? And one thing I would love for you to unpack and go in any direction you want with this, but for whatever reason, a lot of people that aren't technical, they think in terms of whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. They're like, oh, I just want a chatbot, or I want to chat with my content, et cetera. But something you just said there, which, the idea of enabling a person with whatever profile that they have within their role, within their company, et cetera, to be met where they are with millions of pages of intelligence, as opposed to them having to go through everything, is a very powerful idea. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to understand the difference, if they're not technical, between a chat bot and an intelligence layer and a semantic layer and knowledge base. So how do you explain, Joe, to CEOs and those that are maybe not technical, that are excited about this stuff and what have you? How do you explain what it is that you just so eloquently described in a way that then starts to make it, especially relevant to them and what they can do, by definition of better understanding all of the horsepower and how it can be, put together and customized, et cetera? Like, how do you explain that stuff?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think I'm probably guilty of, loosely using the chatbot terminology from time to time as well. So I won't claim perfection here, but I do think it's important to recognize a distinction. And I think by and large, a chat system, like we're all very comfortable with these chat systems now that are becoming more coming out of the ChatGPT moment, right? Going back to late 2022. Mm-hmm. And I think when you think about a vanilla chat system, I think about a system that may be attached to some data, but its primary interface is conversational. It's something that I communicate with. Its main goal is to communicate something well with me. Yeah. To maybe I learn something from it, maybe I get an answer from it, but it's probably kind of confined to that chat, as an interface alone. And I think when you start to get bigger than that, it starts to become something that is not confined to a given application space. It starts to become something that's not confined to a given type of output and a given type of way it can impact whatever you're doing. So one way to be more than a chatbot is to be something that escapes, the interface alone, right? I don't just go to a single chat window and talk to you. And that's why, I don't want to make this a product plug, but I think about this all the time, so I can't help but think in terms of our product.
Go
That's
for it.
why
it's more tangible. Please go ahead. That's exactly what we want.
Yeah, so as we've built the IDC Quanta system, we have, of course, built a chat interface on the IDC website. Like, we must. There must be a place. It's too powerful, it's too useful, it's too great not to be able to go and talk to this thing and get good answers and get help. But we've also built its connectivity into Claude, so you can be inside Claude. Claude can access the IDC intelligence on your behalf, the same intelligence you get on our website. We've also allowed you to email this thing, right? You can go, so it's escaped the confines of its application. It's not in an application anymore. It's beyond that. It's a thing out in the world that you have different access points into. So that's one side, and we'll continue with that. It's going to be in Teams soon. It's going to be in ChatGPT soon. It's going to be in Slack soon, right? This is all work that we're doing now. Mm-hmm. So that's one side. Is, am I making an entity and I'm making a capability that shows up in different places? It shows up in Word and Excel and in PowerPoint already through the Claude plugin, and will show up other ways there as time goes on too. And then on the output side, what can it build for me? And what can it create for me? Does it have an opinion about the kinds of information it creates for me, the kinds of artifacts it builds for me? Is it just an anything machine that'll make whatever I want? Or is it something that shows up with an editorial point of view about what good looks like, and shows up with an idea about truthfulness that, and utility of its own? I think that goes beyond, those things all go beyond chat systems as well.
Yeah, I wrote that one down. Does it have an opinion? I think that's a really powerful way to step also into context. I get excited about knowledge graph. I get excited about, the digital data and the exhaust that comes off the back of all of our interactions with systems. And therefore, how do you make better sense of the contextual nature of the question or the person that's asking the question at that moment in time? So can you go one step further on helping the audience understand, when you say opinion, what exactly are you talking about in relation to the difference between one large language model off the shelf, whether it's, an Anthropic, or an OpenAI, or something in the open source community, like something you take off the shelf? Like if I read a book, there is an opinion inherent in the author's perspective, but Absolutely. We're not talking about something that's as static as a book, right? It's more, it's more than that. So maybe just, if you could go into that, because I think that would be very interesting.
Well, the book, I think, is actually a good example of a highly opinionated thing, right? Yes. Because you can't change the book. It is, it was written the way it was written, and maybe its opinion is disguised, maybe its perspective is disguised, or hard to see. Like there's a lot of language in there. Anything could happen, but it's hardened in the sense that you're not allowed to persuade it. And I believe you're very allowed to persuade the AI systems that have been built for general consumer and enterprise use today, and that is highly intentional, right? In fact, they are trained to be persuadable, because on some level, or at least like in a non-independent way, being persuadable is related to being useful. Mm-hmm. If I couldn't persuade it to become something that I actually want, then it's not gonna go where I want it to go. So the art of what we're trying to do at IDC is to create something that believes in the market intelligence that we purvey into the world, and holds that as its central truth, not because we believe there's no other truth out there, but because we believe that having it have that point of view, that perspective, that opinion about what IDC believes is truthful data, because we have a methodology, because we have a way we do it, is an anchor point that you fundamentally can't get from these other models. They will try to answer your question however you want. They will interpret your subtle, desire to have the answer come out a certain way. Like they're pretty smart about that, and you can drive them to where you unconsciously want to go. Our product is designed to be different than that. It's designed to resist that. Now, it's still built on an LLM, so there's, you have that danger at all times, but the whole product methodology is to push, in an opposite direction.
I think that's a fantastic way to answer it. I think that's super helpful. I wonder when you envision the when you envision someone interacting with the IDC perspective, and maybe they're bringing their perspective and they want to have their perspective stress tested against the IDC perspective and perhaps enhanced, perhaps iterated, and so on and so forth. These are all things that I believe can now happen in a much more fluid way than, right? And that's kind of the magic, I think.
It's absolutely the magic. It's also something we know our users really want. Most of the IDC customers are comparing, different types of market intelligence across different sources, and so our intent to be opinionated and to have an answer and a foundation for the truth that we think is out there that we've spent time building is not an intention to ignore ignore other facts or persuade a user that they're bad, right? It's simply a reference point through which the system can then begin to explain and try and understand differences. And I mean, sometimes, like any complex enough system, like sometimes the IDC data, looks like it disagrees with itself at times because, one market forecast was done with a certain methodology, a certain type of market, a very similar market, maybe done at a slightly different time. Those numbers can look different, and that can be confusing at first. And so we have to cope with this, multiple truths and all right, what do we think is the hypothesis or a good hypothesis behind explaining those differences? So that's a little bit inherent as well as a sort of second order problem we have to solve. And we try and apply it to external data and external perspectives that our clients will bring into our system or bring in contact with our system as well. That's very much part of the goal. So like opinionated and open, you might say, or opinionated and curious, you might say.
Yeah. What is it? Strong opinions, loosely held, or something along those lines?
I love that. Yeah, from a management perspective, yes. That I love working with people like that, and I love trying to be like that. I think it's not a bad model.
Of course, right? Of course. So here's a topic as a transition from right where we are, which is a natural transition, right? Which this notion of closed frontier models versus open source models. And there's a whole lot of context that we could provide. One of which is I think it was July 1st. Alex Carve went on CNBC for about 18 minutes and just lit it up as only he can do. But what he was talking about happened to coincide with a partnership with NVIDIA around open source models and yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he said, and we don't have to get into whether he's right or wrong on this, but one of the things he said was frontier models, have so much utility, in this, that, and the other, direction. But then there's the open source models. And when you think about the cost differential of frontier models versus open source models as one vector, there's many vectors to consider. It started to get a lot of people's attention because people started to realize when they looked at the scoreboards that were measuring the performance, and the price is what you pay, value is what you get type equation. A lot of people today and go forward have lots of different perspectives and debate this topic of when and where you should be using, which one. And I don't even know what question to ask you on this one, but I just want to go in any direction you want to go with this. But I would love to hear your thoughts just in general, because this is a major topic of discussion across, all sorts of different stakeholder groups. I'm just curious, when I say what I just said, where does your mind go first?
Yeah, I think it goes to the place that companies that are good with technology have an advantage going forward, will continue to have advantage because the art of this is going to be experimentation and appropriate use. And you're going to have to learn that in your domain with your data, or the best way to get through that is to learn that in your domain with your data. So I think the main advice is probably banal here, which is don't tie your horse to one, or don't tie your carriage to one horse, or I don't know what the right metaphor there is, but keep experimenting, keep trying things. The landscape is moving so fast that what didn't work 6 weeks ago even, or at least certainly what didn't work 3 months ago might work just fine today. I've been through I think 4 generations of building AI systems with generative AI tech, starting back at LivePerson in late 2022. And we build totally different now because the capability has changed so fast. Same thing's true with how I want to use, open source versus closed source models. I think it's hard to say exactly when and how, but I think to some degree, the intelligence saturates eventually for most tasks, and so you probably will be able to use open source models for a lot of tasks, and they may be the most economically viable. I think eventually this stuff will get put onto edge compute over time, and that's going to take longer. But when I think about where this is going in the further future, I think about models running in all these different places, and us getting really good at smaller, more affordable models that can really do great things. So if you're a company that's trying to figure this out and you're not experimenting, you'll fall behind one that is.
Without question. And I think one of the things you mentioned there that really is a topic that I also want to hear about that's connected to this is the evolution in the way things get built. I was talking to a senior engineer yesterday, and his words, not mine, he essentially said that it's almost as if in the last 6 months in particular, that he and his colleagues had to almost just reinvent the way that they do what they do. And build what they build because of the opportunity to abstract themselves away from so many territories that they used to have hands on keyboards to, build stuff by hand and what have you. And we can use all sorts of analogies and metaphors. But I wonder, from your vantage point, as somebody who is building and has been building for real in this space for a long time relative to the AI ecosystem, how do you think about the way the engineering and the product management and leadership and all of this stuff has changed and functional roles? Like, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, just to differentiate quickly between the two issues at hand. So before, referring to different ways to build with AI, different harnesses you need to put around that technology, which has changed quite a bit. That's changed progressively over the last 3.5 years, regularly, right? Now, to your point, the way that we build has gone through a massive phase transition in the last 6 months. I think most of us had the experience of. For me, it was the Christmas. We take a week off at Christmas, or at the holiday season, I should say, at the end of the year, and I went and started building some stuff for my family, which I try and do when I have free time to keep sharp, and also because it's fun, and. This is December, January, right? That right around that time, and I was blown away at that point with how facile the code gen tools had become, and they've just gotten better since then. But that was kind of the moment for a lot of us, I think, kind of end of 2025, early 2026, when things really shifted. It demands nothing less than a complete rethink of what you're doing and how you work. At IDC, we're in the middle of that. So I just started the CTO role a couple of months ago, as Andrew Hamill, our previous CTO, good friend of mine, left for retirement, and so taking over the broader org, it's become clear to me that we really need to work differently, and we need to have agentic presences in our daily life as a team. Not so we can't be just working with our own code tools, right? There have to be some presences out there that have the ability to help us and to help more than one of us, and that reshapes, I think, how jobs are done. I don't think it destroys expertise, but I think it allows you to use that expertise better. So I think a great product manager should still be defining, like, what does our product documentation look like? What should this AI create so that we can read it and understand it, and so that it can read it and understand it? And then a great engineer should be saying, like, what does our deployment process look like? What is good enough from a testing and monitoring capabilities standpoint? This perspective is needed. Anybody who's ever tried to vibe code anything, who also has an engineering background, has, I think, quickly learned that these things will go wherever they think you want them to go without regard for quality of work, unless you force them to have regard for quality of work. And the same is true, up and down the stack. So I think you need humans that bring perspective, and you need thoughtful process building that looks different tomorrow than it does today. And then I think this last thing that you need is you need to kind of give yourself over to some kind of shared agent systems that your team can work together with. That's the piece that's coming the last, and really just starting for most of us now. We're very early on those days ourselves, but I think that's an important component we're just now building.
Can you go deeper on that for sure? I know the technical community in this audience is going to want to hear your thoughts on that for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's still all very much in prototypes for us, so I don't want to portray it as beyond where it is. I'd love to come back and tell you how it all worked, but our working hypothesis is that there should be, like, take a product manager for instance. There should be an agentic helper for that product manager. That agentic helper should have a clear picture of how we document our products. The product manager should in some ways kind of be the primary point of contact for that system, but not the only point of contact for that system. Anybody who wants to understand how well is this product development process going? Like, are we on track? Have we built enough? Have we built the things we set out to build? Like, what's working well, what isn't? Like, what state is the code base truly in, right? Full up and down, like top to bottom of the build process. Like, everyone should have access to this entity in order to get whatever answers they need, to understand whatever they need to understand about what the company is doing and what it's building. But that product leader, who's maybe its best friend, its primary user, probably has some special permissions there, right? Their job is to make sure that it's adhering to the process as intended, and to help define the process too. So we're looking at those problems, I think, not just for PMs, but broadly across the work that we're doing. And like I said, I'd be happy to come back and tell you more about how these experiments go.
I would love that, and I want to ask the question because I meant to ask it, a little bit earlier in the conversation. So, are there characteristics in the people, and you don't have to be too specific here, but I've heard stories, and I've had experiences where there are people that kind of run at it, and then there are people that need a little bit of something else, and then there's other people that just they for whatever reason it's not happening, right? And I think a lot of companies are looking for perspective on what your experience has been, and or obviously being sensitive to all that stuff. Like, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are the characteristics of moving and shifting a product and engineering org to the 2.0?
Yeah, I think that in some ways there's nothing new under the sun here either. It just matters more. I find that people who are doing a great job with innovation in AI systems are the same people who did a great job innovating before. And a lot of it boils down to the ownership model that they have. I think that's probably the most important variable is, does this person see the work around them that they're responsible for doing as a thing that they want to own? Not that they want to own exclusively at the expense of other people. Like, I own it, you don't, but I own it and I care about it. Like, we own it and I own my piece of it. If that's in somebody's mind and they're moderately creative, I mean, if they're totally uncreative or, just not fit for, that's a different story, but there aren't that many people like that. If they're just moderately creative, moderately insightful, but they're like super passionate about like making their work different and better, sharpening their axe, then I find they do great, right? And they do great in different ways. Some people might optimize a process that we've got today enough to make it 2 times better, and somebody else might be thinking about like rethinking that whole thing from scratch, and you kind of need both. So if I was going to boil it down to one aspect, I'd boil it there. Obviously, like, good communicator, great with language, like thoughtful, open and reading in the world, like all that stuff matters. Reading in the world really matters a lot now, more than it ever has. But a lot of that follows very naturally from this, one marker of like, I just really want to get this right, and I don't want anybody to stand in the way of me getting this right, and I don't care what it takes to do that. It's fun for me, and I think the best people find it engaging. They're not trying to do a great job because they're at a company where if they do a great job, they'll get paid more. Hopefully that happens. Like, I want that for everyone. But they're doing it because it's just inherently meaningful for them to find innovation, greatness, fun.
I love it. And that's, Bill Walsh, the score takes care of itself type stuff for sure. And I want to be cognizant of time here, but I just would love for your thoughts, right? Because things are moving so quick. And I think there are some people that would want to say, like, hey, where are we going to be in the next 6 months, right? Which is kind of an absurd question. So I'm not going to go there per se.
Yeah.
But what I would ask you is the last 6 months feel, as we just talked about, that in the world of product and engineering, there's been a significant acceleration and a whole lot of exciting, but a lot going on.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to get faster in the next 6 months? Stay the same? Slow down? Like, where are we going to be if we chat in 6 months' time about this topic?
I think that it's going to get more uneven, and it's going to start to get costlier in the enterprise space for people to be on the wrong side of that unevenness. I think the two things that are starting to be formed in people's minds, at least in mine, as critical, that like are a little bit too hard to do still, are one, the enterprise data layer, or the data layer for your application, whatever it is, like making that intermediary data layer that's accessible to AI, that's usable by AI, that can be part of the AI's memory in a natural way, and so that you don't have to like kind of re-explain context to this thing all the time and like rebuild another version of the same thing. It's like slightly different than the last thing. So being able to get that right is going to be kind of a major unlock. And then this like multi-user thing, where I have an AI that is accessible and usable and itself unbound from the application a little bit, and something that Alec, you and I can use together to plan for this podcast, and naturally, because of how it's deployed, constructed, built, and where it's deployed, constructed, built, transgresses that boundary or straddles that boundary. I think we start to get those two things in play, and then that's like a tipping point of sorts. So I do think there's gonna be some massive changes from that. But I also think there'll be people on both sides of that change, and we're going to start to see some winners and losers soon.
I agree 1,000%, especially the unevenness because of the compounding that kicks in, from the folks, to your point, that really, see the signal versus all the noise, and they're building against it, and it's hard work. But yeah, that's a fantastic answer, Joe. And I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to hold you to it. We're going to mess around with this transcript when we do the next one in 6 months. And it'll be very interesting to see where the world is.
Yeah, that's the best thing about all this is like you think you have a picture, but you never really know. I was telling my kids about this just a few days ago. I remember watching, this is maybe 20 years ago, so there's like complicated timelines here. I watched a show called The World of 1960, which was made in the 1940s. And the advances that they were going to have in 1960 were insane, right? I've been trying to find this online for years. So if anybody knows where it is, please email me, joseph.bradley@idc.com, because I would love to find this thing.
Someone better do that.
Yeah, please do. It's a great example of how hard it is to predict and how bad we are, how bad the human psychology is at stepping out of its frame and extrapolating. We're terrible at it. So I would love to come in 6 months and find out all the things we were wrong about today. That would be great.
It would be very exciting. And, you can always just point to the Jetsons and Elroy and flying cars and, all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah. They were going to have flying cars in 1960. That was definitely on the list. Yeah.
Of course. It's always on the list,
We finally got video phones.
Sometimes, I don't know who the comedian is, but when people complain about the Wi-Fi not working on the plane, they're like, really? You're going like 600 miles an hour? Like, that's the thing. It's like, I think you're going to be just fine reading a book for a couple hours and getting to wherever you're going to.
It's hard to slow down. It's hard. This is the peril of modern society, man. It's just hard to slow down. It wears on all of us a little bit. Sometimes having to read that book is the best thing.
Listen, not to be the old man in the room, but like careful with that social media. Those are cigarettes sometimes. You might want to put it down and just read a book. It's good stuff.
Agreed.
So, all right. So, Joe, you gave your email address, so I'm going to make sure that's in the call notes.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to share with the audience before you go? And I'm going to thank you on behalf of all of them. This has been an awesome episode. And I know that it's going to be very well received. So thank you. But anything else you want to, chat about or touch on before we wrap things up?
Listen, I think we hit a ton of stuff here. I'm really excited for what's possible in the enterprise right now. As we discussed, I think, whether it's the next 6 months or not, there is this looming sort of have and have not situation coming, and for me the train to get on with zeal on all of this is, if you're not right now figuring out what your core IP is, what your core value is as a company. It doesn't have to be IP. It can be process too. It can be kind of anything, but it has to solve a substantial friction that you can't solve with an off-the-shelf AI system. If you're not figuring that out today, and not seeing that clearly, we spent a lot of time just ruminating on that at IDC, what makes us special, what makes us valuable, what's going to stick. Mm-hmm. And I think we have a good answer for that in the proprietary intelligence and the methodology, the process, all the human stuff. But if you're not doing that for your company today, then you are setting yourselves up to be one of those have-nots. You probably have something. It's probably already there, but you've got to, now's the time to, carve away, in the Michelangelo David sense, right? All the stuff that isn't that sculpture about your company. That's how you build the thing that's going to survive. So I guess, yeah, maybe that's a good way to leave things here. And Alec, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Joe. It was awesome. And I will definitely look forward to having you on again in 6 months' time or sooner, when we can compare the way the world is now and the way it's going to be then. But thanks again, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Looking forward to doing it from the flying car.
Done. Take care.
All right. Cheers.
See ya.